Hey everybody, Joshua here. So I've just finished creating an article on the Unimatrix Zero Substack called Working with AI, It's Not as Easy as You Think. And the subject of this video is basically universe building, right? Because a lot of people think that working with AI, you just tell it what to do and it does it. And it takes zero knowledge, zero creativity. You just tell it what you want and it spits it out. Well, that's what I would call AI slop, right? That's what most people that are familiar with these things would call AI slop. But you still have to have a reasonable amount of intentional creation behind it. You have to give it something, right? So years ago, back in 2023, and this isn't the first part of the article, so we'll go over what I did first, and then we'll get to the universe building part. So initially, I took a photograph of my dad on the beach. We call it the solitary man. It's a very emotionally important photograph. It represents something very special to myself, my father, and the people who know him. And when I recreated the image using GPT-3 back in 2023, and I added his cat Duke to it, and the title is The Solitary Man, with his best friend at his side will never be alone. And I put my dad's orange tabby cat there. A lot of people, they immediately got the symbolism. They immediately understood it. And working with generative AI at the time, especially images, it came, everybody was like, wow, that is phenomenal. I can't believe you got such a good result. And I was even blown away at how good it was. But now that things have progressed to where they are 3 years later, I put the same image back in and I said, hey, take the image that I created with you back in 2023, let's update it. So I gave some details on it, and that's what you'll see when if you go over and read the Substack, you'll see the updated image and just how much better it looks, right? And one of the other things I like to do is I'd like to take images, right? And I like to put them into the AI. And it's not uncommon for me to sit there and have a 5-minute conversation about my vision, right? How I perceive the image to look. Sometimes I'll give the AI, it's like, listen, I want this. And right off the first time, it has everything perfect. But what we've done is we've done some things, or like I have a friend of mine who also has it, and what we've done is we will use, they will describe a similar idea, just not flushing out the details as much as what I do, and see if we can get the AI to be on the same track. We've even taken the same prompt and put it in 2 different AI models, both from OpenAI, to see what type of result we get from the same prompt. And some design elements are just identical. Other design elements, slightly different. So I basically say AI art requires direction, not just prompts, right? That's the difference between slop and intentional creation. So when I took Stash, I took a picture of him. I had him in my arms. He was sleeping. I took his picture, right? So I said, okay, here's the reference material. Create me an animated, a caricature of my cat Stash. And that's what it did. The poor little guy was sleeping. So when it generated the image of this cute little kitten, his eyes were closed. So I had to make a modification. Okay, his eyes are open. They're like a golden yellow. It rendered the same picture with his eyes open. Absolutely. I mean, the image itself, if you go to the Substack, you'll see it. It's beautiful, right? So what I was then, I was like, okay, well, I want his name to be on it. Stash, right? I want his name. And then it wrote, it put Stash. And I'm like, no, I want like a cat inspired font. Let's see what we can render, right? So I give it a series of modifications. And this is where some of the new tech comes in. Some of the new tech is actually plugged into, like I have an Adobe Creative Suite license for every Adobe app in existence. So I've got Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff plugged into it. So I can make use of all of those utilities within GPT. So it adds a huge amount of other things that I can do. Absolutely amazing. So what happens was I get his name on it. I get the styling right. And I'm like, it's too small. We got to enhance it, make it a little bit bigger. And eventually, like I even uploaded a couple of things onto TikTok about it. And then eventually I'm like, okay, well now I want to add a background. So that's what I did. I described the type of background that I was looking for, cozy and relaxed and excuse me. I dictate to the software. And if it takes me several paragraphs to do it, I'll do it. Subtle design elements that I would like. And I describe the environment. Like when I close my eyes, what do I see? What do I envision? Right? And sometimes, like I said, sometimes, you give it a couple of keywords and it comes up with a general idea. But the more I go into detail, the more authentic it can be, right? And it came up with an image of Stash that I really, really liked. And I was like, perfect. This is exactly how I would envision this picture to be. This is perfect. And then I'm like, okay, well, the animations, I've been working with Grok. I don't have, super Grok. I wish I did, but having all of these subscriptions and stuff, it costs money, right? And I wish I had like, GPT Pro. I've only got Plus. I wish I had Pro. I wish I had like Super Grok. I only have the free Grok, so I can only do 6 seconds. I wish I had Super Grok so I could do 10 seconds. It would, higher quality video, longer videos. It would really improve things, right? Expand my capacity. With Grok and doing animation, sometimes you put it in and it's perfect. You look at it, you're like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. Doing intro videos for this podcast, stuff like that, it's really, really good. I don't know when I'm going to start using them. There's still some, stuff I got to work on, but it's getting better. I think one of the big things holding me back is the length. Like I maybe I should try it on Sora, see what I can get Sora to do. Because I think Sora does have a let me see here. I think Sora does have a much longer generating capability. So I think that'll work. We'll have to see. I'll experiment with that. But I've done so much work with this image generation, and it's really helped me to visualize things. Like one of the business concepts I have, it helped me develop flavor profiles. It helped me develop packaging designs. And I sit there, I close my eyes, I hold my phone, and I dictate to it what I envision. And it's done a really good job. So I also I animated Stash again, if you're on the Substack, you'll see it. He basically comes up and he's, I'm here for my cuddles and snuggles and stuff like that. The voice, not really a big fan of the voice, but there's not a lot I can do to change that. So I say here in the Substack, the real truth about working with AI is, yes, AI saves time, but the creation of quality AI still requires creative labor. You must direct the tool, revise outputs, maintain aesthetic consistency, provide detailed descriptions, make editorial decisions, know when something is done. Because you can keep going and then lose yourself, right? AI does not eliminate the role of the creator, it amplifies it. The difference between AI slop and AI art is intention. I talk a little bit about AI universe building and my final thoughts. So I've had some people give me a hard time about it. They're like, oh, well, AI, it just copies other people's work. So you're not doing anything original. You are, in fact, because yes, you can get similar outputs, but the more detail you put into it, the more effort you actually put into it means that what you're generating just has that much more uniqueness, right? You're the one who is crafting the prompt. You're the one who is adding the details. The AI itself is just taking your vision and putting your vision into, how would I say it? Your vision into something consistent, right? So that's basically what it's doing. It's taking your vision and putting it into something more consistent. So in order to articulate this, like images, if you tell it, hey, create a picture of an image of a, okay, well, Stash is laying in a tiny box, and his whole body is just like his head is on the floor, and the rest of his body is in the box. It's really funny looking. Where was I? Ah, yes. So when you have reference material, that's always good. Like I will go on to Adobe, and I can bring up I can license images and put them in and then modify them and do all that work. I can take, a lot of my work that I do with AI is based on taking already existing art and saying, okay, how can we make this better? Like I redid a logo for my friend's pizza shop. There's nothing wrong with his logo. It doesn't scream, hey, look at me when you're on social media, right? Like it's just it's just sort of black and white. It's just a random white logo on a piece of paper that he took a picture of it with his phone. It looks terrible for social media. So I, excuse me, I took it. I told the AI what type of design I want. And I said, let's turn this into a cartoon. Let's do it in this particular style. I want to use this particular color palette. And here are the accents that I want to use. And here's some here's some material that talks about, my friend who owns the business. And eventually we got to one that works really well. And then I pushed it a little bit too far. And I was like, nope. Rein everything back in, right? We'll bring everything back in and we'll start from where I think it should stop. Turned out really, really good. I showed him. He thought it was absolutely amazing. Valentine's Day is coming up, so I made him one for Valentine's Day. It's called Be My Pizza. Absolutely loves it. Like, just thinks it's the greatest thing ever. So let's talk about, AI and universe building and how it affects things. Like AI slop. One of my good friends, he's an older gentleman, trying to explain to him how this works. And I figured out a really simplistic way. His name is Daryl, and he drives a yellow Jeep Wrangler. He's got an old Jeep TJ. It's got a lift kit on it with big tires and stuff like that, and a winch in the front. He loves his Jeep. His life goal at his stage in life is real simple. Do a body, separate the body and the frame and do a complete body off restoration of the entire Jeep, right? Do a modernization and restoration of the entire Jeep. That would be his ultimate goal. Like, I tell you right now, if you gave the guy a bunch of money, he would probably help some people, but other than that, he would rebuild his Jeep. That's what he would do. So what I told Daryl was, okay, and I brought this up and I said, I typed it into GPT and I was like, tell me a story about a man and his Jeep, right? Make it a short story about a man and his Jeep. And it thinks for a second and then writes a short story about a man and his Jeep. And I'm like, what do you think? And he's like, well, that's kind of cool. It's just a basic story, not a lot of detail. And I said, okay, well, next, I said, we'll give the character a name. I said, the name of the guy who owns the Jeep is Daryl. It's and I put in the details on his Jeep, the model year of the Jeep, the color of the Jeep, the fact that it had a lift kit where it didn't have a lift kit before. I talked about, the aftermarket lights on it. So I started adding more details, right? Adding more context. And I started saying, oh, well, Daryl likes music and he loves his Jeep and it's, this and that. And he's done this in his Jeep and he's done that in his Jeep. So what I did was I started building the universe, right? Like, we started with just a character and an object, right? And then we fill in all the details. Instead of having the AI basically do full slop mode and create a story based on the concept of, tell me a story about a man in his Jeep, right? Now, the man has a name. The man's Jeep has a color. It has a style. The Jeep itself has become its own character, right? The AI now knows everything about the Jeep, how it drives, it's, what he's done with it. It now has more background information on Daryl, the character of the story. He's this many years old. He's got this many people for relatives. Here's where he lives. He likes to do music. This is his favorite instrument. These are his hobbies and stuff like that. Now you've created all of these extra details, all of this extra context around the man and his Jeep. So the AI is now able to become infinitely more creative and actually come up with a much better story. It's able to generate something that incorporates all of these other details and all of these other elements into the story of the man and his Jeep. And it goes from being a story of a man and his Jeep to the story of Daryl and his adventures in his Jeep. And I said, well, here's the new story. And he looked at it, he's like, that is so much better. He goes, there's so much more detail, there's so much more nuance, there's so much more context. My daughter and I, we created a family tree for our cats. We created a story about our cats. And the AI, we would articulate who's related to who, what the cats looked like. We would describe their mannerisms, what was the cat like, and it was capable of creating a series of, my daughter was able to create a series of short stories with an older version of GPT, a series of short stories about our own pets, right? Like, she would describe what the cat looks like in great detail. She would talk about the cat's manner. And what would happen is we would build an entire character profile, move that over, create another character profile, move that over, create another profile, move that over. And then we would cross-link the profiles and how they're related and how the characters interact with each other. And then we would describe their environment. You know, where do they live? What do they do as a colony every day? And those are the details that you have to put in. So yes, a lot of people, they're like, oh, AI slop. But what they don't take into account is the creative work behind it. And the AI is getting better. Like GPT-3 was really good, right? 5.2, even better. Like the details, the amount of effort that you can put into it to get stuff out of it is so much better, right? Now, eventually, and I don't want to say it, but eventually, you know, I don't know what GPT-6 is going to be like. I would love to be out there on the bleeding edge of all this stuff, being able to push it. I really would. Like, if somebody wants to hook me up with, you know, the higher end subscriptions on these utilities, I'm completely down for that. You know, like if somebody wants to say, hey, here's a guy, he's, you know, he relies on these technologies to function every day. Let's help a guy out. Man, I would be just beside myself. You know, because I use them. I'm working on, you know, my daughter, teaching her how to use the tools responsibly. My wife, you know, because of her work, she has to be careful, but she doesn't use the tools a lot. But the fact that, you know, there's still a bunch of people out there that don't know how this works is shocking and disturbing. Yes, you can create amazing things with AI. Like everybody's got the new trend, you know, creating an AI caricature of yourself by telling it what you do. Well, if I upload a picture of myself and say create an AI caricature without giving it any details, it's just going to be a picture of me. But if I tell it, hey, create, you know, I want a caricature of me, and then I can ask it, you can say, okay, how can I make the best caricature? What information do you need from me? And it will reply before it even creates the image. Here's the details that I would like to know. And you can have, you know, I sit there and I dictate on my phone. And, you know, like I said before, I give it those details and it creates something unique, right? So as much as people want to say, you know, it's all AI slop, it's all garbage, it's all useless, sometimes I can come up with an image like that. Other times it could take me a couple of hours to get it right. Like I might regenerate it and go, you know what, we're going to start all over again. That's it. I'm done. I'm starting all over. Or I'll be like, you know what? I have a better reference. I have better reference material, right? Maybe sometimes there's a design element that I just can't get correct, right? Maybe it's something that I just can't get correct. But that's generally the way it works. It takes a while to get things. Being able to feed it in through Adobe, it helps. So I guess it still comes down to the user. It still comes down to what your intent is, right? Yes, you can create miraculous things with artificial intelligence. You know, what is the likelihood of stuff going wrong? It's still a high likelihood, but you have to go through it. When I write my Substacks, I will spend... It is not uncommon for me to dictate, I'm going to say, maybe a couple thousand words. And then go through it and be like, okay, well, section 2, that doesn't really sound like that. That's not conveying my thoughts. Let's regenerate section 2. Here is my more defined thoughts on the matter. We'll go through it. I'll dictate for another 5 minutes and then say, okay, let's do the rewrite. And it will go through and refine things for me. So to create, some of this, it could take me a couple of hours to do a well put together Substack. That's just the nature of the beast, right? It takes time. You have to be patient with it. You have to want to put the effort in, right? So yeah, AI saves time. It could take me a day to write the article, but if I'm just speaking into the microphone, and it's like, hey, what's your thought on this? And I give it my thought. And it says, okay, well, what's your... And I've had that before where I've told it, I want to write on this. Here's my initial thoughts. Create a list of points where you think that I should have greater clarification. And I'll say, okay, response to point number 1, here is my logic. And I'll go, okay, for number 2. And I'll say, yep, here it is. And I'll go through it and say, okay, I've collected all the information, we'll now write the article. So I get it, and then I'm still not done because I'm Canadian. I got to make sure the grammar's correct, got to make sure the spelling's correct. So I put it in through my editing software. I sit there and I'm like, well, I don't like how this is worded, so I'll make some editorial changes, right? I'll change punctuation, I'll change grammar, I'll change spelling. I will modify it to fit better, right? And, that's what you have to do. Now, before I stop this, I did mention my wife using it for her work. Now, she can't use it for her work for obvious reasons, but for other reasons, I actually use it to help her. Now, my wife is not a native speaker of English, right? Her native tongue is Mandarin. And English is a second language to her. So how can I do that? How can I use AI to help her? One of the things that I find the easiest way to do it is I know how to define a word. I know how to explain a word. But in order to do it so my wife understands and there's no confusion, what I do is I have a custom GPT that I created. And I uploaded a profile that I created specifically for my wife. I'm like, okay, she's a non-native speaker of English. Her native language is Mandarin, right? So when she asks you a question, remember the context that she's not a native speaker. So it has to be broken down into simplistic terms. And for more complex terms, you can subjugate some of the English vocabulary or more difficult words using definitions that are written in both English and Mandarin. So what it will actually do is it will write her a very simple explanation of how to do something or the definition of a word, and it will actually put the Chinese equivalents in as it's speaking. And she's like, oh, okay. And that's it. Like, instant. She just gets it, right? Because of the way it's been put together. So to do that, it took me time to explain the context of what's needed. My daughter can use it for mathematics, for example. If her teacher explains her something and she's like, I really don't get this. I was like, how would I do a 13-year-old imitation? Oh my God, this is so difficult. I don't understand. Like, she doesn't actually act like that. She's half Asian, so when it comes to understanding stuff, it's completely different attitude. But it can go in and it can explain things in a much more simplistic way that people can help learn. So AI is not a replacement. AI is a tool. It is a tool that needs to be used. We need to teach young people how to use it. We need to teach people older people how to use it. We need to teach people how to use artificial intelligence intelligently, right? It is not to replace your work. It's to boost your capacity. It's to help you, in my opinion, it's to help you realize your full potential. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. AI will never replace human creativity. Might come awfully close, but we're not going to see it. I don't think we'll see it in my lifetime. Maybe with what Elon's doing with this whole grok in space kind of thing to have access to heating and cooling, that means, unlimited cosmic power. Maybe that will change things. I foresee a revolution when that happens. Like when he starts, building data centers in space, that's going to change things, because then we're no longer restricted to resources here on Earth. But here we are. We're approaching about the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to cut the video off. But yeah, AI is a tool. It's a tool that can be used very, very well. And I think when you have the right intention behind it and you have the right creative mind, you can create beautiful things. I think that AI, when used appropriately, will be one of the things that sends mankind into a different level of enlightenment, a different level of education. I think that if used appropriately, we could be looking at a revolution for technology. I think that if it's implemented in the classrooms appropriately, if it's implemented in the world appropriately, that we could very well be looking at a second renaissance. Maybe the final renaissance for humanity. Because once the AI renaissance happens and our full creative potential, both artistically and scientifically, is unleashed and supported by artificial intelligence that can only help us expand our horizons, we could be looking at the final renaissance for humanity, because AI power will increase, our creative capacity will increase, and there's nothing but growth. Anyway, I'm Joshua Eaton for Unimatrix Zero, and you folks have yourself a wonderful day.